at the Korbel School of International Studies. We strive to provide a safe and intellectual space for queer Korbel students and our allies. Our 4 co-directors are Jill Plone, Chris Thurman, and Eric Boskin, and me. We think this is especially important, this group is important because at a curricular level, Korbel tends to ignore queer issues, and even courses with gender in the title are most often actually only about heterosexual women. How are Korbel students supposed to develop, secure, or develop policy for a world they don't fully understand? This panel was born out of interest within Queerbell leadership in gender, human rights, and human trafficking. I was born in the land of Pat Robertson and came to study in the land of Dr. Dobson, where it's not hard to find a particular view of sex work as sex trafficking that parallels how queer people have been treated, stigmatized and criminalized. Viewing both queer identity and sex work is so inherently wrong that a person can only be tricked or traumatized into them, assuming that both must be either pathology or a crime. Not wanting to admit that queer people or sex workers could be at peace with themselves and lead happy, healthy, productive lives. Our panelists today hope to provide some perspective on that theme. Before giving the floor to Professor Claude for opening remarks, I would like to thank the Korbel School for enabling student-led initiatives like this. Professor Destrafer is supportive of this panel, obviously the panelists themselves, and Thomas Walker of the Center for Multicultural Excellence for his support, guidance, and encouragement to ruffle feathers. I also invite you to attend Queerbell's film series held here on Alternative Fridays. We'll be screening Quinceañera next week, and our final film of the year is a documentary about the gay rodeo circuit, and will be followed by a field trip to Charlie's, Denver's queer country line dancing bar, for dancing lessons. All information for all these events are on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you, Rex. Welcome, everyone. My name is Claude I'm a member of the faculty here at the Josef Korbel School of International Studies. I am also the director of the Center on Rights Development and the Human Trafficking Center. And the topic of today, and in fact, most of what Queerbell does, has impact on actually both of the work, both areas of work that I spend a great deal of time on. So I'm delighted that Queerbell is doing this, and I'm even more delighted that you decided to come and hear this panel. Was it last year, or that we did a whole thing on sex?
Yes.
Yes. So, and the purpose, it was actually a little bit controversial, because we basically, the controversial in the sense that the critique was that we were not being fair, having both sides of the argument. The problem is that both sides of the argument meant, in fact, reinforcing a dominant paradigm. And we purposely set up a panel in which the panelists were talking about issues in which they had often been suppressed and repressed, and wanted to set up a safe environment to talk about these issues. So I'm going to begin with some short introductions. The panelists from your left to your right. Begin with Dr. Buxton, who is an associate professor here at DU, focusing on media, film, and journalism studies. Areas of particular interest to him are film criticism, cultural studies of film, script writing and sexuality, and media education. An accomplished writer, director, and producer, Dr. Buxton has created such films as 2001's Hole and the 1997's Portraits. Dr. Ntepp is a licensed attorney in the state and federal courts of Colorado with over 15 years of experience in commercial, civil, and criminal litigation. She teaches a wide range of criminal justice courses for CTU, including criminology, victimology, criminal law, criminal procedure, and laws of evidence. She also has a background in academic development from working with inner-city high schools, focusing on Department of Education compliance and diversity issues. Dr. Ntepp served as an attorney and a professional researcher with the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence at CU Boulder, where she supported mental health and social services, courts, community corrections, parent boards, and local businesses through the Safe Communities, a Safe Schools initiative. Additionally, she has co-authored several publications to assist schools and other agencies with the interpretation and application of laws pertaining to violence. As the lead faculty for Southern Colorado and Denver campuses, Dr. Ntepp is instrumental in structuring the course schedules, providing significant support to faculty and students, serves on the committees, and helps develop the current culture that exists in the College of Security Studies. Allison Timm is a student at UCD majoring in sociology and communications. She has done extensive research on marginalization and human trafficking. She's currently an intern and development assistant at SWAN. I hope you'll say a few more words about what SWAN is during your talk. Yeah. Domina Elle. Dom is a professional dominatrix. She's a sex workers' rights activist and board member of the Erotic Service Provider Union. She worked in the holistic medicine field as a non-erotic massage therapist for 18 years and has been a sex worker for 16 years. Both locations have allowed her a very intimate and unique view into the human condition. She approaches sex work as a much needed therapeutic modality. She's a board member of the Erotic Services Providers Union and is currently organizing and fighting for the decriminalization of sex work as a path towards harm reduction, for equal protection under the law, and for the right of sex workers to negotiate their own wages and safe working conditions. And she hopes what I think we all hope will be provided to be her monumental case will be heard on August 7th of this year in the California courts. I have to say that I still remember with absolute clarity the first time you and I met on South Santa Fe, dressed in your finest, and we were having, Human Trafficking Center was having a fundraiser, and you were passing out flyers for human rights for sex workers. And we had this instant connection on the corner of South Santa Fe Arts District, one that I will, and you were accompanied by your friend.
My latex rubber doll,
right, yes,
full drag.
Yes,
and inflatable breasts.
It made my evening, my weekend. it made the month, actually. So I'm always delighted to have you back, and thank all of the panelists for coming. All right, great. Thank you all.
Right, thank you very much, Professor Destray. And again, to all of our panelists. He's stealing my paper. All right. So how we're going to kind of work with this panel, since we kind of have an intimate group, is what we're going to do is start off with some questions that Queerbell and some other people have put together that we think might kind of give us a few talking points to get started with, and then we're going to open it up to you guys here in the audience. And what we're going to do actually to begin is we're going to start by playing this recent advertisement that's been playing in Denver. If you get a break from your Netflix and decide to kind of watch maybe some local television, this ad has been playing for about 3 weeks now. And it is put out by DATA, which is an anti-human trafficking organization, and it falls under this hashtag Real Men Don't. And I don't know, Rex, how do we get the lights? Left, shade. Well, that made it darker.
That's a good start.
Kind of. I think it'll be clear enough. It'll show. Now, there is no sound accompaniment to this, which is fine because all they do is play some very sad classical music in the background. Keep in mind that, again, this is put out by an anti-human trafficking organization, and the title of this is Real Men Don't. So that's that advertisement. And I see that we have a few other sex worker advocates in the audience today, and I just see them shaking their heads, which is never a good sign. But if we can maybe have lights back up. So just to go maybe to the panel to work our way down, how do you feel about this recent advertisement? What do you feel about the general messages or its opinion?
Who sponsored that ad?
That was from Data.
The Denver Anti-Trafficking Alliance.
Yeah, that's the first thing that you really need to understand is who is funding it, and that is their agenda. Demand abolition is written all over it, which is Swanee Hunt. Swanee Hunt of Hunt's Alternative Fund, I was reading back in 2011, that they had a decade-long initiative to push throughout every state in the United States. They used words like changing the horizon of society. They wanted to interject this narrative. They also say, we will not distinguish between consensual and forced, which is a real problem. As far as the second thing that's wrong with that, they want to talk about what's devastating. What's devastating is when people are arrested, and then their lives are totally destabilized by the process which occurs after the arrest. And then the record makes it so everything becomes much more of an obstacle. And then as far as when they want to talk about sex workers being hurt during working with sex workers, well, let's talk about who does a lot of that hurting. Law enforcement, probation, people in official government capacity are doing a great deal of that harm. I wish I had a list. It's very similar to this one, and it's just got many names on it. The woman in the news recently who filmed her rapist, her probation officer, because she knew no one would believe her. We can't report crimes committed against us or each other because of our status of criminalization, and that is the #1 damaging thing, and you can trace all of the problems that involve sex work to criminalization. And then the age of entry, that is very misleading. The age of entry comes from the study, the exploitation of children in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, put out in 2001 by Estes and Weiner. It was only talking about ages 0 to 18. So if we're talking 0 to ages 100, that is not correct information. The average age is 25, between 25 and 30, based on the best data that we have. And then, I don't know where they get the age of death, but if you've been thrown through the system and broken down and put into debt slavery after arrest and had all of your opportunities in life just slamming in your face, because of that arrest and the subsequent record. And what do they expect? Do they expect people to have hope or to, I think you get the point. And then out of harm's way, you want us to be out of harm's way, decriminalize us, okay? So, and they also don't buy us, they buy our services. There's a big difference. That's all I have to say about it.
So I think it's pretty obvious that the problem with that is that it victimizes all sex workers. It sees women who can be empowered and are not abused as fundamentally wrong and just shamed. I think the problem a lot of the time is that when you're arrested and you're put into these services, you're just shamed. That's verbal violence, it's abuse from the police. I've heard stories of women being beaten by police. It's not the men buying the sex that's always the problem. And obviously if the woman is being victimized, if that's an issue, but it's lumping everyone into one category, and that's just not okay.
The biggest thing I see as a problem is 95% of all women have been sexually assaulted or been abused. So when you throw that number up there, that's crazy to me, because that's true for, no duh, but that's true for all of us. 2, there is no man, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I haven't been told to be quiet, but I think my hair tells you I might misbehave. There's not a single man on the planet that doesn't pay for it. Do you understand? Whether you get it through a pretend where we're at the bar and you're being nice and I act like I care or whatever, on and on and on. Marriage, whether you're leasing it or not, there's no such thing as free pussy. There's no such thing, okay? So as long as we're pretending like, oh, well, the good girls give it away, that's a lie. So as long as we realize that nobody's giving it away, then all real men do have to buy it. Let's just be honest, okay? And in fact, if a woman walked up to you and tried to give it to you for free, men, you wouldn't want it. You'd be like, what's wrong with it? If Holly Berry walked down the street and offered you free pussy, you'd say, you might think about it, some of you. but most of you would wonder what's wrong with it. So the concept that women should, there's no value to us, that there's no value to that process, that it's not a social reality, that income is involved or value, period, as our statutes show. The truth is all of us are guilty of the prostitution statutes because it doesn't say for money. It's for anything of value. Well, you would have to give it away to homeless people to not have no value. I mean, a sense of humor is value, a nice car is value, a cocktail is value, of course. But my point being, again, that I think, of course, it's very misleading because it's acting like violence against women is for those of us who sell it. And I think I made my point.
Well, I was actually looking at the ad, and I'd sort of seen it before, and I'm looking at both sort of who's producing it and who it's produced for. It's definitely, in terms of kind of class and gender and sexuality, and I would say sort of religious tradition, it's being targeted in terms of very mainstream, sort of middle class, sort of heteronormative kind of audience. And in a certain way, there's this kind of underlying kind of demonization too that's going on in this. And I also actually I found it very interesting that at the very end, real men, and it's there's kind of a racial bias to it too, and it sort of zooms in on this African American man. So it's not sort of white men who are doing it, it's sort of African American men. So I mean, there are all sorts of ideological intersections that are sort of happening, both in the production of this and in whom the target audience is. And it's basically the target audience of most sort of mainstream broadcast channels, which happens all the time. I once asked a news person, why don't you do more stories about homosexuals? We only do those if they basically have some sort of impact on sort of the mainstream society. I mean, we're sort of marginalized outside. So the only time that there's sort of a problem that's impinging, and I'm assuming that there must be sort of underlying all this, since this was the last 3 weeks, you said, a lot of sort of going on in town with respect to sort of prostitution, etc. For this to sort of pop up on the television now. I mean, I always sort of look at what's behind it, underneath it all.
I would like to point out, maybe this will lead into our next question, something that I'm surprised the panelists didn't mention. Again, the only victimology that we're given is women. And children. So it's not that men are purchased for sex either. It's that only women and children are victims of, in this case, they're trying to make a case of sex trafficking, but they're going for kind of all prostitution. So this implies that men and boys are not also sold or do not also sell their services, because those are two very different things. I want to be kind of clear with that. And it doesn't really lead anything in for any sexuality kind of in between, or any sort of gender that someone's identifying with in between. We're getting a very particular image of like a little blonde girl putting on makeup, which is, I think.
You mentioned this earlier, but sort of is that this is data.
Mm-hmm.
And data, you ought to know, while it's supposed to be the Denver Anti-Trafficking Alliance representing all of Denver and all the different voices, is in fact an arm of the Denver District Attorney's Office. So that's not a particular surprise. And again, I want to second, many of us, you should know that many of us were very deeply concerned when Data decided to take this very large grant from the Hunt's Alternative Fund. And I had long conversations and protested that, and they kept on saying, well, we're not going to be influenced by Swanee Hunt and the Hunt Alternative Fund. And my response was, it doesn't matter whether you think you're going to be influenced, but clearly they were, despite what they said. Yeah. But in fact, the Swanee Hunt now owns you, and will now tell everyone that Data is part and parcel of, I hate to say it, because they've stolen this term being an abolitionist from the rest of us, and made it into something that it's not. Which still infuriates me, taking this good term of art and look away from many of us, and have termed it, into this whole demand reduction campaign and focusing on hymns and Johns. And I love your remarks. It's what I say to my class all the time. Every good man pays for sex, nonstop. And this is what, right? What we do.
That's the goal. I mean, every woman is told when she's tiny that she can't give it away. Every mother wants, they have to, you go from their religion to their, the speckles on their face to detailing how important it is that he matches with you. And our culture, where we pretend like it is now so new wavy or something that it's all about love, that's insane. That's absolutely insane.
I remember my, when I was a younger woman in a very serious relationship, my car needed fixing, and I wasn't married, but my grandmother and both my mother were like, hey, you're having sex with him, you make him buy your car. I'm like, what? What? I mean, I was blown away by that. Like, really? Okay.
Well, down south, absolutely. I think it's absolutely you're supposed to make sure that you're getting some kind of value out of the relationship. Otherwise, mom's very disappointed. Mom's very disappointed.
Well, and then maybe that slides us in to this next question, which are, why are the lines maybe between choice of being a sex worker, exploitation of being a sex worker, and being someone who's been trafficked into sex work, why are they often viewed as so blurry, or almost the same thing, when we're talking about this issue?
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, I would say it sort of, in some ways, eliminates the guilt of, sort of, kind of those from sort of the middle class and, from gender in terms of patriarchy. That, it's like, particularly with sort of middle class in kind of the United States, we sort of like to put a bubble around this in terms of what's what's being exploited, who's being exploited. We don't like to think about, in terms of food processing or food workers, sort of picking things, same in terms of sex. And if you kind of like, oh no, this is bad men over here, sort of trafficking sort of children, and particularly from kind of other countries, then I don't do that, right? And it really does sort of eliminate guilt a lot, I think. Is why those categories get blurred.
Makes sense. I think a big part of the blurring is the statutes, bottom line. If the statute says that we are all prostitutes, females, then you're all Johns. And, I like the gender differentiation, like you're saying. And, of course, we're selling services, sex workers are. So of us who are not sex workers, we're selling services, tell the truth. But anyways, I'm sorry, back to the point. So, but like you said, the guys, those are not so clear in the statutes. The statutes are pointed towards the female. And when it does that, it has to blur it. Otherwise, look at pandering statutes. Pandering puts in the same statute as criminalizing the behavior of hooking up two people who might commit prostitution. And that just means two people who will sleep together, right, and exchange any value. Okay, so that's everybody you hook up with. But nonetheless, that's pandering, but so is raping a prostitute. Huh? How could that be part A is if you forcibly, criminally use criminal intimidation or menace a person into committing prostitution, that's pandering. That's rape. Right? If you criminally intimidate or menace someone to have sex with you, and then throw $1 on top of them, does it change it from anything? No, it doesn't, right? So rape is the same, but for prostitution it's called pandering, which means it's class 5 felony, whereas class 2 felony if I actually rape you and then don't drop the $1. So, thus Kobe is never going to be guilty because he's always going to drop the $1. And those of us, and so it makes the statutes completely irrelevant. If we would really deal with assault differently, like the problem is if you assault somebody, you're in trouble. You can use sex as an enhancer if you wanted to. But the bottom line is if you assault somebody, you should be in trouble. But we don't do that because we want to control sex. Oh my God, if I have to show assault, then I'll never have prostitution. Well, right, but you would have trafficking. You know what I'm saying? You would have that. So that's the problem. I think the statutes are trying to control our ability to work, or own our own bodies as women and as men, to tell you the truth. And as long as we're doing that, we have to keep the statutes kind of vague. And so it blurs everything together. That would be my opinion.
I think the problem runs deeper than just sex work and lumping things together. Race, gender, sexual orientation, we always put everyone into boxes. Like, look at the people in Baltimore right now, they're all thugs. There's no difference. We need to realize that there are people who are empowered by sex work, people who are just doing it for money, people who are exploited. But commercials like that just put everyone in one box, and we have a hard time deviating from that in our society?
Well, there's this awesome report that I was trying to find it today. It was Advances in Social Work. You know, the title of it, maybe Claude, you might remember what it was, but it's a report that was done around the same time in the early 2000s, and it was actually a report on the groups that were instrumental in getting that legislation passed. And it really paints a picture of their motives and agendas. And there was a very distinct, direct goal to conflate the two. They wanted to conflate consensual sex work and trafficking. And that's why when you watch TV and you see these vice operations, same old prostitution vice operations that are on the news, but now they're calling it sex trafficking. It's newspeak. And you know, it's all about dominating the narrative to push, like Hunt's Alternative Fund, to change the face of society based on, you know, what they want people, their attitudes to be about prostitution. They are anti-prostitution, and so if we conflate all sex work with trafficking, well, we hate all forms of sex work. And that's basically been very successful in doing this. And I wish I could tell you the study. I can find it later, but it's very fascinating. And then you also have just a lot of money, billions at this point, being poured into the nonprofit industrial complex, the rescue industry, which has exponentially developed up at the same time as this. It is in demand. They go together. I hate using that word too, the abolitionist movement, but they really are an anti-prostitution movement. And they have a lot of money, and they're making documentaries, they're making commercials. A lot of their money, we had a researcher who tracked, there's a great article, Towards a Rescue Paramilitary, was the title of it. Pretty amazing article about all the different organizations and the ones that we do have some public information about their budgets and who gets government funding. It's very hard to track. It was something like less than 10% of government funding was being trackable for these agencies. Polaris getting millions and millions of dollars, and yet what are they doing with this money? They're raising awareness. They're not creating tangible services in most instances, but they are raising awareness, and that equates to these commercials, documentaries, getting out there and talking about sex trafficking. And so, you know, everyday people who watch commercials and TV, and or the recent article here in Denver in the Rooster magazine that said Denver was a trafficking empire. It wasn't even hub, it went to empire. And we had a total last year of 13 underage and 300 over 18 arrested for prostitution. So, you know, anyway, I think that they have really tried consciously and proactively, aggressively to push this narrative into the mainstream construct. And they've been very successful so far.
I have a question, Elle. So when you're looking at this and you see that video, it's 95% all that blah, blah. Is the numbers different for the, you know, for porn industries? Did you turn a camera on and all that changes? So sex work is now okay because the camera's on?
I've been looking at that, and I don't know enough about that topic that I you know, we all hear that. Like if you film it and it's a porn, it's protected by the First Amendment.
It is.
But I also see arguments in that line. So I mean, I'm so busy studying other things, but that's definitely something I would really like to know. I mean, why aren't we doing that if that's, you know?
And we are. I was going to say we are. What I meant was the harmony different, because I know that.
Oh, okay, I get it.
You know what I mean? Because I know that at PTs we have the girls use their phones. They all have cell phones, smartphones, and they're now videotaping it. Not the person's face, but of course the act. Or they tell the cop if it's what's going on undercover in the car. As soon as they get in, look at, hey, this is going to be an audition. I'm trying you out for my at-home online thing. So do you want to play or not? And if you know, what? Yeah. So then it absolutely makes a huge difference. My point being, it seems, again, going to what you're saying, hyped up, a part of the plan. If we're only focusing on the non-videotaped exact same behavior, that's what's creating the 95% of deaths and or whatever, like you said, the age. Starting of age and all.
12, age of entry 12.
Yeah. What's the age of entry in the porn?
much older.
It's supposed to be 18 though, I guess, but I don't think so.
Well, it
Legally,
depends.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, that's another thing. The porn, child pornography, that is a huge problem. But it's a whole different world. It's a whole different world.
And that's what we should be doing with trafficking and prostitution. It should be a whole different world.
They're not going to find those victims busting adults who are engaging in consensual sex work. And they need to be looking for those victims. I would love for them to be focusing their resources on those victims.
Oh, yeah.
I saw an ad the other day that looked like it was set up to pull in pedophiles, and I sent it, a message saying, if this is a vice operation, good job. If not,
You might
are you
want to
okay? What's going on there? But it's just, yeah.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
Maybe that pulls us into our next question here too, because again, we've mentioned repeatedly the idea of a John, of a man buying sex. We haven't talked about Janes at all, that women also participate in buying sex. So if we're talking maybe about kind of the commodity of a relationship, that girls are getting something out of it, well, guys are getting something out of it as well. And I think you mentioned the sense of humor. It doesn't necessarily have to be a money exchange. If you're intimate and have a relationship with someone, ideally it's beneficial for both. So why is it then that we think, maybe going from just a pure media aspect, why do we think that the media presents one particular image of a sex worker who's generally, she's female, she's impoverished, she's exploited, we get her, normally very bruised is kind of the advertisements that we get, and one particular image of the person buying sex, which is always kind of male, older, unattractive, kind of scary, walking down the street, wife beater. I've seen a lot of cops of those sorts of people getting arrested. So why do we only get those two images instead of this vast kind of sex worker and vast sex buyer, profile? Why do you think that is?
Okay, me. Okay. One of the things I want to be careful about sort of talking about media in the same way as sort of undifferentiated. Mainstream commercial broadcast media has certain guidelines and rules, and has, again, a particular audience that it's trying to reach, in which these kind of images both sort of create kind of a fear and also kind of a safety net for them. Because, I will say that in other kinds of sort of media formats, I watch a lot of premium cable. In terms of, and I was one of the people who like Queer as Folk. Not everybody liked Queer as Folk because the images weren't, in some ways, as mainstream, as sort of safe, as sort of kind of blending into the mainstream. A recent, do anyone see Looking? I think it's canceled now. Looking, okay. Which actually caused kind of a bit of an uproar in terms of its queer characters. There's sort of changing sexual partners. There was a male prostitute actually as part of, I think, the first season storyline, right? Yeah, in terms of things. And actually, it was, I think, presenting those characters differently. I'm not going to say less stereotypically because there's always typing going on in terms of things. But you would never find those on mainstream broadcast television. You would find these sorts of images, right? The same, because, either sort of, okay, the person is being victimized, okay, and so they're kind of a savior complex, or demonized because they're the ones who are bringing us down. Right?
Well, may I mention that, right now on television, and these are produced by the very same producer, Tom Foreman, you have the show Gigolos on Showtime, which, basically glamorizes male prostitution, and you don't see them, needing to be rescued. And then he also produces this new A&E tragedy called 8 Minutes. And 8 Minutes is all about a ex-cop turned minister who has 8 minutes to convince sex workers to leave the life.
Oh my God.
And in fact, it's called, after I'd be glad, I've been in contact with one of the women who was in it, and it's very interesting, the whole story around it, because even the show themselves, when one of the women went to be filmed, the producer said, well, you don't look like a sex worker to me. So, you know, there they are with this marginalized, stigmatized perception, and then they're producing a show that is absolutely, completely down that vein, that's completely false as well. No one's being rescued, really. The whole country believes these women are being whisked away to a new life, but they're not. So now we even have a show that has a completely false narrative about the rescue industry, which actually is a perfect allegory for the rescue industry and the reality of it. Lots of talk and no real doing. But anyway, I found that fascinating about, you know, it is going to be the victim, but why is it that men can be empowered sex workers in that instance, but women, forget it, you know.
We should mention too that
What channel is?
Showtime, it's Gigolos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Don't even know the 8 minutes.
A&E.
We might have a blog
It has
about it,
caused
but
quite a stir among the sex worker population. They're trying to get it taken down.
I think E picked up 8 minutes.
Yeah, it's going to be on the E network.
No,
so
it's on A&E right now.
Okay.
I watched
I read some
4
of the
horrible episodes of it.
So
And
look,
it's about to be on
look at the Human Trafficking Center blog page in a little while, because one of our associates is putting up a good blog on 8 minutes.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
And I can add I sat and for 6 hours took dictation from one of the ladies, and I've spoken with several of the people who've been in the show. And I have an essay on all the behind the scenes stuff. So it's really awful. It's awful.
and it's probably clear from Mel's remarks, but this is a reality show, 8 minutes, as opposed to the other things. These aren't characters, like these are real.
The reality.
Whereas Gigolos is a fictionalized account.
Well, actually, they're real.
Yeah.
They're supposedly actually people, as opposed to sort of fictionalized.
But I was gonna say Gigolo doesn't really work because it's all on camera, so it's not prostitution because it's porn. So I'm saying like they're not really looking at getting arrested. It's not the same thing. When you start playing with porn, you're totally dealing with a different monkey than when you're dealing with the prostitution.
Oh, trauma porn. We're calling it trauma porn.
Okay.
Where, you watch the girl being kidnapped and taken and sold into sex slavery. It's, observing people, it's almost as if they love that, like watching the tweets in support of 8 minutes. It's like, it's like they're really getting into that, and when you find out it's not even based in reality, that nothing that you see is as it is, that makes it even more crazy. But, it's just interesting to watch how people really soak it up, just soak it up.
And then maybe one more question before we kind of open it up for everyone, because I can see that people are starting to have questions, like pens are flying and hands are starting to kind of like creep up, and yeah. So maybe the last question that I would ask of you, but just before we open it up to the audience, what are some of the problems with terminology here for people maybe who aren't familiar? What's the difference between calling someone a sex worker, calling someone a prostitute, calling someone an escort, and then in sometimes cases even too, we have like a service provider, we have victim. What are some of all of these words that are getting tossed around here? Is there a preferred term, or no, or is it very subjective?
Some people in the industry are working as sex workers, because really there isn't an industry like that, prefer to be called sex workers, and sex worker can mean many things, from legal to illegal forms of sex work, from cam to phone to face-to-face. But then there are many who just take that prostitute or whore and wear it with pride. And, also there was, a movement to push that out there into the mainstream construct to basically instill more of an understanding that this is work, this is how I make my living, I want to be respected, that this is my job, and I want labor rights. I am a sex worker. So, there were reasons such as that to get that word out there into the social construct.
I think, I'm a proud whore, because as long as we don't start screaming, let's get all of us a whore, so you're not going to change the statute. Look, the statute constantly says that anybody who exchanges sexual behavior, and let me explain, it doesn't require intercourse. It even allows you to get in trouble for touching her and then she get wet. Okay, so masturbation it's called, but masturbation usually requires touching yourself. At least that's how I masturbate. But I'm just saying, if the statute allows me to be a prostitute, if I touch another person, any place, any bodily contact, and the other person gets off on, gets excited, and we exchange anything of value, we're all guilty of prostitution. Well, that happens on a regular basis, especially if you're cute. But even if you're not cute, you know that it's ridiculous to say those kind of things and then make that a crime. 3 times you do it, you're a felon, because 3 times you bitch it, right? 3 misdemeanors makes it a felon. So really, if you've had sex outside of marriage 3 times, let me tell you, welcome to sex offender world, and you're a felon in the sex offender world. Now, thank God it's for money, so we don't have to register. That's what I wanted to get at next. Human trafficking, prostitution, anything we do for money, it's non-registrable. It's not a real quote-unquote sex offense. So if you really want to, you hurt some children, go get some children, round them all up as a priest, and make sure that you're exchanging money for it. That way you don't end up having to register as a sex offender, have your mouth swabbed, be on the plethysmogram, which is the penal test they put on your dick. They can't do that to women. There's another bias in this situation. All of these entire involvement around the sex crime offense world is gender bias, which makes it unconstitutional, period. Period. You cannot prosecute a male and tell him he has to do a plethysmogram, which is $250 each pop, and sit and watch videos of diaper commercials and then, I don't know, sex, and have his penis measured in a cold room by a little plastic thing, and then not do that to us. How does that work? How do we justify that? How do we tell the pimp that, oh, well, you beat her up, you put her in the hospital, you harmed her, but that's not rape, that was pandering. So it's only a class 5, and you don't have to register, darling, because it was a sex offense involving money. But stepfather, in a relationship, and I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, but you know how it is, you just got married. Your 15-year-old, your 14-year-old doesn't like it. And just one time mentions that he touched her inappropriately. Do you know what that kid's looking at? 98 years right off the bat. 98 years. As soon as he sits next to me as defense counsel, I say, oh, I'm sorry, your 15-year-old girl said what? You touched her breast during what? Dinner? What? Yeah, 98 years is what you're looking at. And so unless you're willing to take a deal, we need to go to trial. You're looking at 98 years. Pimp, no problem. Like she's never going to see any, she'll never walk. That's not a problem. You're looking at, probation, 6 months. I think that's the real problem with all of this. Okay, yeah.
Or we can open it up maybe now to audience questions. Does anyone have one to start off with? Okay, maybe we'll kind of work our way around. So we'll start with.
So something I've been really looking at, interested in, is a connection between rape culture and sex trafficking, or even just sex work in general. So I would love to hear any of your opinions on how rape culture either perpetuates or has no relation to that at all.
I can only do it from a legal perspective, rape culture. Okay, so what I'm looking at is rape culture as far as the 98% of rape is date rape. So I got to go there first. So with date rape, which is 60% communication problems because we don't have the evidence of assault. So I'm going to say the rape culture that is currently going on is very connected to our prostitution statutes. Because as long as we are confused about what is okay sex, then when it gets in front of the jury, I can always make you look female, or if you were raped male, like a whore. And you can't rape the willing. That's the problem with the statutes. And since you can't rape the willing, and prostitution is consensual, you never can rape a prostitute. You're always a pandering. So with that said, they're very, very connected, I think. If we change what sex is legal, in other words, you should be allowed to have sex, period, just because it's fun, and made assault and those kind of statutes, murder, the ones we have already on the books, kidnapping, all of those would stick. And you would not be able to defend against them by saying there was consent. That's the problem, because I can defend any of those statutes by saying there was consent. And that's the problem between the way we are couching prostitution or saying let's keep prostitution illegal, illegal, illegal. Then you constantly keep rape statutes impotent. That's what I'm arguing.
As far as rape culture and sex work, I don't know how much this goes into prostitution necessarily, but like if a stripper is sexually assaulted, it's not, people don't pay as much attention to it because they put themselves in that situation. They got naked in front of someone and the guy can't help himself because you're dancing naked in front of him.
I knew a girl who she was touched inappropriately, told the bouncer, and he said, well, you took his money, we're gonna call the cops on prostitution for you unless you give it back. So the whole thing about being marginalized is different than with race or sexual orientation for sex workers because you put yourself in that situation, or that's how it's seen.
Again, everything goes back to criminalization is the root of many of the issues. No labor rights. If you had labor rights, that wouldn't have happened. So, we need to establish a framework where people can report. And then, like I said earlier, you have a lot of, they feel they can't report, they can't go to the police, they're not taken seriously. And then look at the rape culture in prison system. It's huge, and the staff is doing a lot of the raping in the prison system. And, police, I study cases that are, I don't know why there's such a culture within law enforcement for rape, but there is. It's staggering. It is staggering. It's not just a few, it's staggering. And this is just a list for pedophiles. I have another one just as long that's for sex workers in specific.
Can I ask you a question about, because so these are police officers.
These are police
that have been
officers
arrested?
who've been found guilty
of I thought maybe it was
sexually
like
abusing children.
Sort of the Johns who've been arrested.
And some of them have raped, 30, 40 sex workers, police officers, and gotten away with it over many years.
It's about power and control.
And somehow these cases never seem to make it out to the news, and then you also have their faces. I was doing some research lately, and you know how they always want to plaster John's clients' faces up like that. They haven't even been found guilty of anything yet. But officers, you try to find a photograph of an officer that's been found guilty of a crime like that, and it's tough. You really got to dig. I just thought that was an interesting note.
Alright, so maybe next question.
Decriminalization is really the path that we are fighting for. Right now we have our case, and definitely we're getting resistance. GoFundMe took down our fund drive after letting us raise $30,000. We filed our brief. The next thing you know, the drive is taken down. We're still trying to get the $500 or so from them after a few months. So we, have to put another drive up somewhere else, and it's just, we're definitely getting resistance, but we're also getting a lot of support, and it's just going to take time. Either way, we're going to keep appealing, and we're going to keep fighting, and we're looking at developing cases in 2 other states additional to California. But if decriminalization were to be established, 9 states would be given relief right away if that case in California gets off the ground. So that would be amazing. And people, hopefully they understand, we want, it's not like we don't care about people who are being trafficked. In fact, we think that police resources and discussion, would be better applied if we make a distinction between consensual. And we, within our own industries, with our own realm, the sex worker realm, we've been taking care of business for quite some time now. As far as, we don't want legalization, we don't want to answer to the government, we don't want government pimps. So decriminalizing and then allow us to develop standards just like other vocations have done.
I think we had a question from over here. You had your hand up, Madam?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Actually, that judge in Arapahoe County that was caught soliciting a 14-year-old male and is now doing 90 days home detention. I found that really interesting that he wasn't charged with other crimes, but he seemed to get a little bit of a slap on the wrist for soliciting a 14-year-old boy online.
Timeout.
And pandering, we used to hand out condoms. We used to go up and down cul-de-sacs and just try to talk to people who are purchasing sex and people who are selling sex. Like, hey, share the love. Here's your condom. I can be charged with pandering for handing out condoms. So I don't do that anymore like I used to. And I think I got solicited a lot more than I was able to have conversations about the laws in Colorado and how to keep yourself safe and how to take care of your sex worker and how you're, to keep that relationship copacetic. I mean, I can't even walk that line professionally because I have to be regulated by the regulatory board. I have to be licensed and I have to comply with ethics that I agree to, and that lot of issues with harm reduction in Colorado, where we agree. We think that I think people could be a lot safer if it were decriminalized, that if we could have the real conversation surrounding this, and the difference between what we cannot call a victim of the commercial sex industry or human trafficking, and then someone who really is victimized by human trafficking or the commercial sex industry, and that's where conversations aren't being had. Or women who purchase sex and men who sell sex, they're not being targeted in states and talked about at all.
Or men who sell sex to men. But in that same vein, University of Colorado got in trouble for pandering as well by helping out with STDs, doing clinical checks. This was back when Auschwitz just opened. Yeah, sorry. Never pronounced that. I just hope I'm not saying Auschwitz.
No.
So, yeah, but I remember we had a case, and we represented University of Colorado, and Aurora District Attorney actually tried to charge the University of Colorado because we had a clinical in which we were helping prostitutes with pandering and with sexual immorality in place of prostitution.
And see, that also kind of goes into the anti-prostitution pledge, which only recently was struck down by the Supreme Court. But all these faith-based organizations stepping up over the last decade to get their funding, they all had to, were happy to sign that anti-prostitution pledge, and that blocked a lot of sex worker friendly organizations from getting any funding. And these are the people who really need to be out there helping these people, who meet them on their own terms and aren't trying to come at them with a narrative. And you can't force people into treatment. That goes against everything that recovery stands for, as far as what I understand.
Right. Here, really quick, I think that
The follow-up question and then a different topic.
just jump in and then we'll go to you. Sorry.
About the anti-prostitution pledge, I know it was struck down on First Amendment grounds, and that would apply to any organizations within the United States that have constitutional protection. People have raised the issue that would then not apply to any overseas organizations, and I haven't seen if that's actually a thing or not. Like, people have raised the questions, but I don't know if you know of any other follow-up to that.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
all.
sorry, I wish I did.
No, nobody seems to know.
It's a good question. All right, and then we'll hop over you, Madam.
I actually had a question, kind of going back to the two TV shows, 8 Seconds and Gigolos. I haven't actually watched 8 Seconds, but my understanding is as that guy was calling, people who were placing ads on Craigslist and Backpage and all those things and luring them to hotel rooms and then kind of ambushing them. Whereas Gigolos was very glamorized. Also, I mean, I did see those episodes, and they was showing these guys getting their spray tans and waxing, and it was these women that had a ton of money, and they were keeping them in really nice hotels and nice dinners, and I think that's really interesting to see sort of how that plays into sort of not victimizing the male prostitutes. And so my question is, and I don't know if there's a specific answer, but I'm wondering, for let's say the layperson who doesn't look into these issues and is only kind of basing their opinion on those things in the media, what do you think needs to happen to change that narrative to what we talked about before, separating the trafficking from, consensual sex workers, or from viewing women as solely the victims and men not so much whether they're sex workers or not? So, what do you think needs to happen for the common person that doesn't know about anything going on in the legislation or doesn't have any contact with people in the industry? What can happen to change their minds?
Well, I am an algorithm whore. I really like, finding, like the 8 Minutes algorithm right now is just blowing up. It's going to take getting out there and talking and educating. And, we are doing that. Vice has published a number of sex worker articles, and, the Daily Dot, BuzzFeed is about to. This last year I've seen so much more sex worker voices getting out there into more mainstream venues, which is really good, and that's what we need. And it takes more people, and it's hard because you're risking yourself. You're making yourself a target. It's not lost on me when I'm standing around FBI and Homeland Security and Innocence Lost Task Force, people, and you make yourself known in the local region or anywhere, and then you start making a few enemies in the rescue industry when they, they don't like being called out as the liars they are, when the ones that are, because there are a lot of good people in that realm as well. And I think that's another thing, and I've been doing this lately too, is reaching out to people who are in the rescue industry, who actually get it. You know, they're seeing some of these problems with some of these more ambitious types who are more opportunistic and just padding their wallets. But there are good people there, and we need to build those bridges, and then we can network even more, and together, you know, get a lot more done. You know, we need to communicate, sex workers and, you know, these rescue people, well-meaning, good-hearted, but they don't necessarily understand the establishment or how it works or what happens once people are arrested. I mean, there's just so much there. So just, you know, any opportunity we can to educate and speak and organize. And that's another thing within our movement. We are seeking to get labor training, organizing, so that we can be more efficient and effective. And I'm really excited about that. Check back, you know, in another year or so and see what's been achieved, because I think this is amazing, really, what's going on.
It'd be great if we could leave
Yeah. Absolutely.
stop seeing ourselves as us and them, realize that all of us are, you know, involved in the autonomy of our own bodies, and it shouldn't matter to us, I don't think, whether someone is having sex for value or having sex for, I mean, the concept that we confuse those who come back from war with brain trauma injuries and need help with impotency issues, and the person who's helping that person with it is the same one as, you know, the person who's in a relationship at the bar, and we go home tonight after you buy me a drink, is the same person who's in a marriage. Unless you sign that prenup, and I don't know, I mean, you have to say, I'm giving you nothing, you're giving me nothing, we have no value in this. We're just gonna goose for the hell of it. I don't know, I guess you can't even, because an orgasm, is that a value?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm just asking. I find it one personally, but I don't know if everyone else does. But surely, then, if you're having sex for orgasms, you're criminal. And I think that's, you know, the more we talk about that, like the more we are realistic about what is the difference between the religious side of how we're thinking and what's, you know, what's our reality.
Really, you know, what you're saying is so brilliant. It feeds into that horizon, that social horizon, how we handle or address sexuality at all. I mean, people are still shaming their kids for masturbation. You know, we really need to sit down and, as human beings, without all the ideologies and the narratives, just be human and be okay with ourselves. I mean, people are freaked out about their own body odor, you know, let alone touching and connecting and feeling comfortable in their own skin. And that's what I have realized with so many, you know, clients. My clients have taught me so much. I mean, it's been amazing education about fear, doubt, and processing, all sorts of different, you know, and very vulnerable. You know, humans are, you know, in that place are very vulnerable. And I think they want to be vulnerable. And we need more discussion around all that, even non-sexual intimacy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the point. Like, if you put masturbation under prostitution statutes, oh my God. Like, I can't even, like, any bodily contact at all. Boys, no offense, but you guys' stuff when you're little, it works without any planning needed. Or anything on my behalf, or on anybody else. I mean, you guys' materials work weird, like the wind blows, and, oh, hello, it's like, I have to think about math. Okay, well, that's what I'm saying, though, for us to be, you know, constrained to that kind of real biology, you know, with hey, it better not be for value. What the hell does that mean? I mean, and we don't want to talk to our children. What about that? Like, why aren't we telling teens that abstinence? Why don't we try masturbation? That might be a little bit more effective than abstinence. Because abstinence is not working the hell at all in the inner city. Nobody in niggerdom is, you know, is abstaining.
It's like so people to shut down,
right?
To not develop, to not, you know, their pituitary glands like suddenly going to just.
Don't react to the allergies in the air. You're turning 15, ignore those hormones. It's insane. And as long as we are calling that girl over there who's doing it that way a hoe, and that girl over there a good girl, those are our problems as women. I mean, and I love men, I love them, but the truth is, women need to start talking about it, damn it. Okay? Because if we said no more pussy, even to the gay men, you just stood up and said no more pussy to men, period. Even the gay men would be like, damn, maybe we should, consider our heterosexual friends and start changing some stuff. But women, really, it's about us being ashamed. It's about us not talking about it. It's about us being arrogant and not, looking down on each other and trying to dictate to each other how we're going to have sex and how sex is supposed to feel and what it's supposed to be about. And that's what I think she's right. We just got to talk about it.
There are good media representations too, like American Courtesans, Scarlet Road.
Red Umbrella Diaries.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. They just need to become more mainstream because that's where people do get their ideas who don't have education on the topic. And just letting people know that they can go and see another side of it is great, rather than this like pretty woman savior complex.
Like this today, this is amazing. To be here at Denver University. Wow.
Queerbell, I'm all about this group.
Thank you.
Yay for Queerbell, yeah.
And I think we had, oh sorry.
Can I piggyback again? Sorry, I keep snatching the speech. If there are any resources that are wonderful that you like, if you could forward those to us, and then we can post them on the event page for this, so they could be available for everybody. So any of the media resources or the books or the studies you found, we're happy to share the good stuff.
And before I jump over to Claude, I do want to jump on. I think it's great that you're mentioning like inclusivity, that there are certain religious groups too that are doing a really good job, and that there are also NGOs and other small organizations or other advocates or maybe other avenues that we're not maybe thinking of in this moment that are doing a really good job. It's more of maybe trying to get us all into maybe one collective voice and sit down at the table, even though the conversation itself may be awkward and a little bit extreme, because I know even within the sex worker movement, you have people at different ends of the extreme who want different things too. So I think that maybe that's something to keep in mind as we move forward, that if anyone has any organizations or groups that they're happy with, shout them out. Throw it out. We'd love to have maybe a conversation now even about that. So I'll jump over to Professor Duchesne.
I'm glad you mentioned Scarlet Road, just so you know, hopefully next year the Scarlet Road and crew and organization will be visiting us next year.
Wow.
So we're going to do a big event around that and freak out as many people as
Is Rachel going to be here?
Yes.
Oh my God!
Rachel's coming. If we can.
Wow.
Could you maybe explain what Scarlet Road is
Test the
for
bounds of
people who aren't
inclusive.
aware?
Rachel's the host, but represents an organization that basically provides sexual services to the handicapped, amongst others. And so we're bringing together two very marginalized groups, and there, in senses, there's a whole group of people who are being denied sexual expression because of their physical conditions and other conditions, so the only way, in a sense, they can have that expression, that experience, is obviously to pay for it, right? And so then the sex workers providing that as a service. But even amongst people in the anti-trafficking organizations and lots of them, it's an uncomfortable film to watch because it brings together two very marginalized. We go like, it's like thinking about your parents having sex. You go, ooh, really? They're doing that? Those two people. And so both, but it's great because it makes people squirm. I like it a whole lot, and I love her just getting to having gotten to know her over the years.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. I'd like to recommend also to everybody, some of the people know, two books that are on point for us here. One is written by a former student of mine, now a colleague, by Yvonne Zimmerman, called Other Dreams of Freedom, Religion, Sex, and Human Trafficking. And it was done by Oxford University Press in 2012. And it's the history of how the Palermo Protocol and TVPA came into existence. And she looks about the relationship between the religious and political right, as well as the, quote, abolitionists, still has some rhymes on me, the Cat W folks, the Norma Ramos, the Swanee Hunt group, and how we are now stuck in the very fact that one of the problems that I see from the very beginning is that we've separated sex trafficking from labor trafficking, and we've been living under that unfortunate problem ever since, in that kind of separation. The other one is written by, now shamelessly, we'll give her, well, famously with Vaughn too, is Jessica Pliley. Elle, do you want to hold up her book? I know you have it.
I got it.
Okay, can you, Policing Sexuality, what's the subtitle? What is the subtitle?
The Mann Act and the Making of the FBI.
Now you have to read what's on that badge, because that's a real badge.
Yeah.
What's on the badge?
White slave.
White slave police officer.
Yeah.
And that was a real thing. And so her, what she talks about there is that the language of white slavery, which so influenced the whole FBI and the whole process of prostitution. And so she and I are now working on a very large, well, I'm editing a large volume for Cambridge University Press, and she and I are doing a chapter in which she takes it up to about 1945, and then I take it from 1945 up to present, because I think still is the white slavery construct is still influenced both our conversations about prostitution, about human trafficking, or specifically not human trafficking, sex trafficking, and sexuality in general. So we're still stuck with the 1920s, 1930s sort of twisting, if you wish, almost, of what we think the Victorians were about. The Victorians were a highly sexualized group of people. We just got this weird idea because of Queen Victoria.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with what white slavery is, because I see a few confused faces, white slavery is this idea that comes out primarily of 1800s England, where it's that, and then spread to the US, where white women traditionally from the countryside, young, naive girls, would be lured in by foreign men, normally shown as being very dark, basically as an ethnic stand-in for whatever boogeymen we were fighting at the time, who would then lure them through dancing, ice cream. I have a beautiful print of a guy luring someone in an ice cream parlor over a soda, and things like that, into this life of vice and sin, and then would sell them for sex and sell them into slavery. And we had this continue up into, if you've ever read really bad romance novels from the 1970s, where it's like a man has captured you into his harem type things, that's white slavery myth perpetuating itself, and you can see it in Taken, which is Claude's favorite film. And all sorts of other.
So the other thing I should say is that if you put white slavery into Amazon, there's a new series of books. I think she's got 3 or 4 now. This is a woman who's now writing as they are fiction based on true stories, and in fact, it's the white slavery series. I kid you not. Wow. Finally, the last thing I wanted to raise was we're talking about in terms of, as Rex said, gender, but gender is heterosexual female issues. But there's this whole concept of romance slavery that nobody talks about. And Jacqueline Taylor Sanchez writes about it extensively, or maybe not extensively. Romance slavery is women buying sex from men, but it tends to be highly also racialized because it's a phenomena in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and the southern part of India. So it's white. They call them the milk runs from Canada, the United States, and Europe, flying in for the thousands into the Caribbean to buy sex from black men.
It's also popular in East Asia as well. It's also popular in East Asia.
East Asia, Angola,
West Africa.
West Africa now. So it's expanding. It started in the Caribbean, but it's expanding. And what's fascinating is that the same people, the Cat W people, for instance, would say that that is not the commercial part of the commercial sex trade. It is not part of sex tourism, right? Because sex tourism is men buying illicitly, presumably, men buying sex from women, and that's the sex tourism. But romance tourism, just think of the terminology, is completely different. Because, in fact, you can't be forcing black men into providing sex.
I agree with that.
Right.
In general, period. But can I see a single one you can force into it?
But I encourage you to look at something called romance tourism because it's almost never talked about, but it's a clearly very fast-growing industry, and nobody even talks about it in terms of human trafficking, or even almost as prostitution at all. Right? It's a legitimate sexual exchange for goods, right? Because it's often not cash. It's jewelry. It's promises to come to the States. It's new shoes. It's
dinner.
Night dinner. It's all those kinds of things. But it only became an issue in Jamaica and the Caribbean when high school boys were figuring out that they could get some good money from white women, and so they weren't showing up for school. So they're going to the beaches instead of going to school. That was only time that the local authorities started paying attention that this was a problem at all. Other than that, it's not a problem. It has nothing to do with the commercial sex industry.
Can I say one thing about you were talking about the policing sexuality, and what I found fascinating about what happened was that this is how the BOI became the FBI. They were able, on the back of the Mann Act, that is how the FBI became a truly national organization. Before that, they had only 85 or so agents. Once the Mann Act came into being, more funding, and then they have less than 500 agents, but they are building upon that. And basically, even what we have today, the same thing is this is government expansion of government powers and control through this topic. You know, sorry.
So I was going to feedback on that too. Just, I don't know what your name is. Let me add.
You can just call me Rhonda.
I like you. I've been helping Claude research for his book too on this, the Mann Act and the continuation into right now. And the most profound thing for me to see, well, not only in the TFPA and the language there, but I would encourage all of you guys who haven't already talked to me to keep your eyes on Safe Harbor, because that's another really interesting place where it's reemerging. And so we have this language from the Polaris Project about the commercialization, CSEC, right? The commercial sexual exploitation of children, and that we've needed to create this whole national legislation to protect children when, in fact, in this country, we're not seeing prostitution of children. That's Thailand, or some of these places where you do see it. But all of our records here, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's very much underground here, and it's not in high numbers. These are 15, 16, 17-year-old girls, and yet we're framing them in this language to pass a law that, in fact, based on even preliminary evidence, we only have 0.5% of these girls that are being prosecuted as criminals, as opposed to the rest of human trafficking victims who are being prosecuted as criminals. All this under the table stuff that police officers are doing this, so you have task forces like FBI's Innocence Lost here in Denver, that is a repeat of what Jessica Pliley is saying, that this is the FBI, that they are going to pass these laws. It's, in my eyes, and I want to say this is still pending from data, it's going to criminalize it even worse. And so to go back to what you said in terms of relooking at anything in exchange of value, big problems for that, and failing to acknowledge these stories, and acknowledging what that really looks like in socioeconomic context, and being more in your face about it. I like what you said. Billy and I have discussed that we are going to be making T-shirts that say "Feminist Cunt" on the front and "Pussy Patrol's Fight Against Violence Against Women" on the back.
You gotta get me one. Pussy is my favorite word. I would really Dr. Pussy if I could just get someone to get me to change my name. Yeah, I would love it.
I just can't believe that we're going to say that 15, 16, 17-year-old girls can't consent to sex or even acknowledge the context in which that happens. But are we going to erase rape of boys under 16 because they can't consent to sex?
No, I wouldn't. That'd be wonderful, right? Because we see this new, all of a sudden, interest inside of schools where we're now trying to arrest boys for pulling, hair and touching boobs in high school. Are you crazy? Yeah. You're a sex offender if you touch my boobs in high school. Well, God, can't going again.
So anyway,
but
it's really disturbing to me to see this white slavery be so succinct in the way it's reemerging, and
with the JVTA,
hope we can be in your face, remain in your
SAVE Act.
Yeah,
the SAVE Act and the JVTA, is that what it's going through right now?
Again?
It is the new trafficking.
Oh, is that the one that's on federal?
And and it's going to raise their budget to $1 billion from $500 million, and they're talking about recruiting wounded and retired veterans into special hero corps to rescue child trafficking victims, funding wiretapping initiatives and cybercrime center. So they're expanding their surveillance state, all for those child victims that aren't there. So
aren't there? Is that what you said?
They're not there.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some. It's like what the FBI found under 3,000 in like 10 years.
Yeah.
And then it is like under 2% for 33 years.
Yeah. Well, Safe Harbor is essentially, in my eyes, creating a legal way to a legal creation of sex rehab, which we don't have the facilities for anyways. We're going to be using existing stuff, and it's now this excuse to arrest girls that weren't getting arrested in the first place, minors for prostitution.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
And
when
enforce them
children
into
are
sex
arrested.
rehab, which hopefully if you are faith-based, and I don't have a problem with that if that works for women, but a lot it doesn't, and now we're saving you there. And
Right, I was going to say, if you're 15 and 16, yeah, baby white Jesus is not going to keep it. It's not.
Oh,
It's not.
that's disappointing to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know
Wow.
he's amazing, but I'm just saying, at 15 or 16, you're not very, you're kind of, irreverent to the things that you were raised with.
15 and 16.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if they bring baby white Jesus to you right after they arrest you and take you out of your family home and move you away from all your friends. I mean, I have the latest thing, but that goes back to how Stella got her groove back too. How she went down to Jamaica, black woman, got her little hottie toddy and brought him back here. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna do that when I get older too.
Yeah.
But anyways, but the concept that we do have so many. Homelessness is probably more of a problem in our teenagers than it is that they're prostituted. I mean, if we could just work on the homeless piece, then if we're really going after those who, don't have any idea and just end up selling themselves because they were hungry, we could do that better if we dealt with the homelessness issue and the runaway issue. Why don't we spend some real money? Is it harder than trying to figure out whether or not the 15 or 16-year-old is going to repent from her sexual behavior? Since she chose to sell herself instead of work at McDonald's?
No, I was just going to say a lot of the homeless teens are also the lesbians and gays who have basically been sort of
Distracted, yeah, exactly.
Take some of that rescue money and apply it to, voluntary services that are not court ordered. The study that was done 2007 or 8 in New York City of, I can't remember what it's called, but they found that over half were boys, and that 70% out of everybody that they researched had sought non-existent services. Most of them were not being pimped. 90% of them said they were not being pimped. They were just working because a friend, was working and said, "Oh, you got money, or you got, or for a place to stay." So the narrative in no way fits the reality of what's going on in the world. And I think New York City is a great base city to do research like that. So wow, why isn't that information getting out there too?
Why is that more? Yeah, and the state of Colorado released last year, I believe it was 75 youth from foster care services around the metro state area to homelessness. 75. I mean, it doesn't sound like a huge number, but okay, guys, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, would you say 3 kids and 300 were arrested last year for prostitution?
13 under 18.
Okay, well, 75 at 18 were released. So over 18, I mean, you just tell me, you've been in foster care, that's a great program and always raises you with great self-esteem and great education. So you've got all of that behind you, that love and that care and that education, and now you're free to go to nowhere. Oh, but they do say we'll give you free college if you go ahead, if you're a foster kid, you get free college. Yeah, but a lot of those foster kids don't want to go to college. You'd be surprised.
30 were arrested in the last, 6 years for prostitution. 75 released on but we're going to pass this other law that's needed.
I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm just saying. I think we could focus our energies differently if we're dealing with children and trafficking.
Just so you know, that was John Jay College of Criminal Justice study that was done, and I can give you guys the data on that, just so if you want it, if anybody wants it.
For the 330.
Yeah, the New York City study where over half were the boys and.
Oh yes. Okay.
Village Voice did a story about it too. Sorry.
Yeah, we were online looking at solicitation of one of the organizations in Colorado who are soliciting $4,000 a month for the care of one underage person. So it would cost them $4,000 a month to house this person. We're all kind of like, what? Are you crazy? I've been working with survivors for years, and it's cost me $25 a week, but I don't house them. So if I'm thinking about what it would cost for me to house someone, well, not much, because if they're underage, they get Medicaid, they get food stamps, they're going to get, their school tuition, all that stuff is going to be paid. So a lot of this has become to exploit or to pay other people's salaries. Well, that sounds really good to me. I would love to make a couple $1,000, $3,000 an inch of the exploitation of a juvenile person. No, not at all. I would rather that person thrive with all the care. So a lot of the money doesn't go directly to the person. It goes to law enforcement. It might go to, you know, legislation or things like that are just, the stings are heavily funded, and that's part of where that grant money goes. And I see that as problematic. It should go right to the people, right to their care, right to their well-being, right to their right to choose religion or to not, or to choose sexuality or not. And those choices are being heavily controlled by funding. Well, we'll give you money if you're going to do this, but we're not going to give you money if you're going to do this. And that's where we think that we have a lot of work to do on services in Colorado, in getting people to kind of meet people where they are, which is what we do. If they want to continue providing sexual services, that's up to them. It's not my choice to choose for them. And forcing them into treatment is making that choice for them. They're not allowed to make their choice or have their voices heard whether they like sex work or not. Or creating homeless, jobless mothers, which is a thing we've seen that the legislation has created, and they don't care about that. They don't care about the Crime-Free Housing Act or corporate America doing background checks to hire people, and that when you criminalize someone, you've created that paper trail, what that does to them forever. So thank you for participating in Senate Bill 30 so we could get that signed into law. That was really, really important, good work. I noticed that none of the abolition organizations talked about it, promoted it, supported it. If they were really about helping people, where were they? Where were they in those hearings? They could have written letters, they could have called, they could have showed up to testify, and they did not. So that's concerning to me.
I think Emerson, you had a question?
Well, I was just going to comment when you were talking about romance novels earlier that people should listen to you because you're an expert.
I am.
My wife.
Yeah, this is the exchange that's
Yes.
happening here. I make him come to my events and talk.
I buy her the romance novels.
So there you go.
Yes.
So this is the exchange of relationship.
Okay, well, see, there's some prostitution right here. All right, go in the house.
If you don't tell, I won't, okay? So.
Yeah, just a little piece. I recognize that we are still being, no matter how much we try, we are still operating around and talking around the rescue language. And we mentioned in passing already today, but I keep on trying to figure out why harm reduction model is not understood and promoted as if you're going to be moving in any kind of direction to be helping those who who we think need help. It's in a harm reduction process because it's both, it's self-empowering for those, and it is about making difficult choices in a real world, whereas the rescue model is otherworldly, quite frankly, and has no basis in, that I can tell, in reality anywhere. Well, it's some kind of fantasy reality of the dominant culture, I suppose, or the dominant white culture, or what, the dominant white male. I don't know which, but the dominant culture, and it has, it's seemingly something that is repeated in television and all these other kinds of models. So we've begun to buy. We've bought into it, and I think that even us, those of us who work in this kind of work all the time, always get pushed into realize after a while we're just talking about rescue and rescue problems and rescue issues, and instead of harm reduction. And I've never, I don't, intellectually I suppose I get it, but emotionally in some ways I don't get why harm reduction doesn't get traction. But the students here know I'm an old pedagogy of the oppressed guy, and who was one of my mentors, Paulo Freire. And why doesn't that get traction?
I mean, maybe a suggestion. I mean, harm reduction is more about sort of, if it's the teenagers on the street. The rescue is much more about the people who are rescuing. And that's, it's the very sort of neoliberalist, kind of conditional, if you do this, in these categories, we'll support you. And I think that's why it's really hard, because we're so enmeshed in this kind of neoliberalist ideology.
I think.
Yeah, but it's kind of unrelated, so if you have something that's...
Well, just to quote myself from earlier,
Shameless.
Nothing if not shameless, yeah. Yeah, I think there's obviously overlap and differences between the queer community and sex workers, but the general assumption that you have to be tricked or traumatized into these communities to where you then have to be rescued out of it is a base assumption that the queer community's been pretty good so far at fighting against that narrative, and I look forward to that being true for sex workers as well. Because harm reduction assumes that, well, first of all, that there's harm. And there's a lot of interactions that have happened where there hasn't been harm, like who exactly is benefiting from the application of the law here. And then for the cases where there is harm, then yes, absolutely do the harm reduction, but to assume harm, I think, is part of the larger problem as well that we've been talking about.
See, when I say harm reduction, I'm thinking of the police and
Right.
the criminal system. We want to reduce the harm that is causing. But there are a lot of sex workers, I've watched I've 16 years been watching, the marketplace, and because of the higher cost of living, not so many jobs necessarily available. Getting calls from women in their 30s, late 30s, 40s, who've got kids, and normally they're working in an office setting, and the bills are piling up, and they think, okay, I think I'd like to do this. I mean, it's not even like, oh God, some of them, it's the last thing they thought they'd want to do, but some of them are like, I think I can do this, and I'd like to check this out, and the attitudes have changed, and I think we are seeing a huge influx of people doing everything from camming to phone to one-on-one sessions, more than I've ever seen. So at the same time, you have this nonprofit industrial complex rising up, this rescue industry aligning itself with law enforcement, and demand abolition, people like that, pushing more money, funding more raids. More of these people just, some are having fun, some are popping into the industry just to see what it's like. And then they get busted, their life is damaged, boom. That's like, wow. So it's very dangerous, and since we have bounties on our heads, since government agencies, nonprofits, and police get grants, depending on how many arrests are made, that's like having a bounty on your head. So, for just trying to pay your bills and enjoy your job and, be the authority over your own body and life.
And with that said, when you guys are thinking about criminal law, harm reduction, I don't ever see how criminal law reduces harm. Whenever we want to do, hey, we're sorry you're a drug addict, we're so sorry you're hooked on heroin, we'd like to help you, let's arrest you and put you in jail. I'm just saying, right? So, it does work for those, there are people who go and find baby white Jesus in jail and everything and never touch this stuff again. But what we found through the stats was that it was much more productive not to punish the actual addict and to come up with programs and safe foundational things for people to be able to get off of drugs and be able to manage their lives. The same thing with domestic violence. You do not solve hitting in between a marriage by arresting the two people who are hitting. That's ridiculous and retarded. We've, as a defense counsel, I've never ever gotten a guilty on domestic violence. Let me tell you why. Because it takes two to fight. Okay? And so it takes two to fight. If I charge you both, well then I look like an asshole as a DA, right? Because what's the problem? You both were, I'm going to go and stand, yeah, I hit her in the face. Well, okay, well then he gets up and said, I hit her in the face. This is going nowhere. So my point is that the criminal law is not set up for harm reduction. It's not really. I think we put it in there like as if, victimless crimes, we're still managing them somewhere in this methodology. But the criminal law has never, ever served to reduce harm. Not for drug addicts, not for domestic, making families better, not for any of them. It's never done any good there.
So we have time for about 3 more questions, and I think we already had 3 hands. So, and then after that, when we break, I'm sure our panelists have been phenomenal. I'm hoping you'll stick around for a few more minutes so people can talk to you, ask you questions, hug you,
We need to set up a bunch of nice...
Yeah, and there's also, Domina Elle has set up a ton of fantastic resources and things in the back, and we have lots of food. So
I have information on our case that we're filing. So if you guys, would like to check that out, and if there's any way you could help get the word out or support the effort, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
So let's run through our last 3 questions, and then if you have to leave for classes, we understand. We won't be upset if you start to scurry out. So maybe we'll get right here, my darling.
Yeah. So I want to preface my question by saying earlier when I referred to lay people when it comes to that I'm one of them. I'm not a human rights major. I'm in the global finance trade and economics program here. And my interest in this, or wanting to come to this, was really education for myself on a personal basis. And the reason for this, before I moved to Denver, I was very involved in the BDSM community in Orlando and very open about it. And I was involved with it way before 50 Shades of Grey came out and after. And the difference between those 2 time periods was very stark for us, in our community anyways. People's attitude towards us, attitude towards me, what they thought about me. I went from being, a deviant, and I don't know, I've been called pretty much everything, to, oh, well, you're just exploring your sexuality now, because now it's become a little bit more acceptable. And I'm interested because I used to always say before that the reason people were so uncomfortable about me talking about it openly or sharing with them, my life, was because people aren't comfortable with their sexuality, and because in the United States specifically, there's a lot of shaming of your sexuality, and you spoke about it before, like people still shame their kids for masturbating, and they're not encouraged to explore it and deal with it or confront it, in a positive and encouraging way. And so I'm curious if you guys feel like, just from hearing what you guys have said, if that sort of sexual shaming is a big deterrent to people being okay with decriminalizing sex work. Is that a big mind block for people? They just cannot be okay with it because it's things that only people with weird fetishes do, or anything. Absolutely. Like, men are only going them because they want prostitutes to do what their wife won't do, or kind of all that sort of
Absolutely.
BS that goes around.
There was a comment made by one of the administrator of one of a deferment program, Project Rose in Arizona. I wish I could quote her verbatim, but she was talking about women who have been prostituted. Their bodies have done so many weird acts, and they've been around so many different body fluids. It's it's like her terminology and the way she spoke, and once that's happened, you can never get the itchy off of you. And it was like, wow, you're projecting, and you're dealing with people you call victims, and you're dealing with people in vulnerable situations, and you have that kind of a, whoa,
That's because she did the same thing but didn't get paid. So,
well, no, I was just thinking by your definition, I'm a sex worker, right? Because I've got value out of some of those things, which I think is great. I mean, I think it's
people
great to think about it that way.
Absolutely, and their own fears will keep them.
I had a friend tell me that every time you have sex with someone, you leave a little piece of yourself with them. So if you have sex,
I think you can change that.
Lots of
baby. Finally, a weight loss plan that works. I'm going to be a rich man. Market that.
Who can say such things?
Apparently, sex workers.
Besides,
Yeah, there you go. If you give them, it gets them too, right?
Let's, before we completely devolve into madness and a low fest, let's ask Thomas.
Yeah, first of all, absolutely fantastic panel. Just to follow up the lady before, I have absolutely no background in this area. It's been hugely illuminating, so thank you very, very much indeed. The question or issue that, one of the big issues that I think I've seen over the last few years is around consent. And when you were talking a little earlier about going into a bar, buying a girl a drink, and it seems to be sort of code for, if you've accepted it, now you're going to sleep with me, which I think is hugely troubling in a lot of different ways, because for one thing, I could say to Emerson, do you fancy coming for a drink? And it's just seen...
A cookie, sure.
Yeah, it's just finding that out. If I said to Gillian, do you want to come for a drink? Then there's an automatic assumption that something's going to go on there, which is kind of offensive to me in a way. How do you think it seems that line's being blurred between friendship and relationship with a smaller and physicality and sex. How do you think we actually try and devolve those two areas and two thought processes to really come to an idea of what is consent and what is requesting sexual activity? Or do we need to?
I think we need to follow a lot what the Europeans are doing and having a lot of conversation differently than we're having conversation here. Like I just said, honey, if you don't, even if she doesn't go back and have sex with you, if you make out with her, if she rubs her hand against your hand after you bought her a drink, I've got you for prostitution. So it doesn't even, that's what's scary. It's completely making our interaction, if at all intimate, illegal unless we're married. Because the only exception is spouse.
And that could be
or doing it without
friendship.
That's not
too. It doesn't have to be a sexual intimacy.
You're prostitute too.
That's a leasing situation there. He's leasing your pussy. And if he doesn't pay the rent while he's leasing it, you will look at him and say, you're not getting shit to the rent. Right? In the marriage, it's a lot more open. It's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You're not paying the bill.
On that, is it an actual marriage? Or is that, what about a live-in couple, or?
Well, here in Colorado, because we're common law, I would use common law as a defense to any prostitution statute. So if I had a really bad situation, like Heidi Fleiss, okay? And I was trying to make Heidi Fleiss into a hooker, and she had millions, and I only had one John. That's how they got you. Got to look at that story. That's a good story. She only had one John. Well, I would have made her John, if she was in Colorado, her common law husband. And then she would have walked every charge.
And it seems too that maybe part of Thomas's question is how are we handling too this idea that there can't be like an intimacy of friendship too, that you can't be at a bar and that there's a consent issue. There's this blurring of what is friendship, what is sex, and then what is I think kind of maybe you touched on this earlier, Elle, that you're not buying a sex worker, you're buying a service, and that there should maybe be a different sort of area of consent maybe with that.
Exactly. If that was clearer, then the statutes wouldn't let you just get hemmed up for just being in the car with some guy who's spending a bunch of money on a bunch of girls.
But do you think it's that culture is hemming up the statutes, or statutes are hemming up the culture, or is it this kind of snake eating itself?
Oh, I think the culture that the statutes have not been reenacted since '64.
Yeah, they're antiquated.
So I'm going to say at the time the culture was very apt for this. We were still sitting, you know, blacks and whites couldn't sit next to each other in classes, let alone exchange anything. So these severe statutes are, I think, definitely stemming from that kind of American culture that's
time for a challenge.
I think we have a narrative too of what men are, and that they're inherently predators, and that you can't control your urges.
Right. Thank God.
And and it's not just with that. Like I saw a thing on Facebook the other day about men looking at women in bikinis and immediately objectifying them, and there's nothing that they can do about that in their brains. It's just like it's unbelievable that we have this idea that men can't control themselves.
Or that women can't think. You know the statute does. I was going to say, the statute says that you can prosecute a guy who slept with a woman who mistakenly believed he was her husband. Yeah. Let me say that again. You can get charged with rape because the woman who you slept with thought you was her husband. Right, maybe it was, but if she came, doesn't matter. But my point, right. So the only way that you would think that would work would be twin brothers. But nonetheless, it's still on the books. It's humiliating to me. It is humiliating to me as a woman to really have you guys list these 17 different things that are protecting me from being raped. One, you're going to help me if in case he looks a lot like the guy I think I'm married to. You're going to help me just in case I drink too much that night, and well, that's the only way you're going to get it sometimes. But anyway, and then you're going to help me just in case. What about the one that says, I'm in prison, and he can have sex with me, as long as it's conditional to a legal search? I don't even know how you wrap your mind around that, girls and boys. But if he's legally searching your vagina, I don't know what he's looking for with his dick, but if he's legally searching your vagina, it's okay. It's not rape if he's searching. So these are protections that are there supposedly for me because I'm a female and I can't tell whether you're hitting on me or you're buying me or are you misleading me into coming to get ice cream? What were you saying a minute ago?
Yeah, it's ice cream parlors.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't count for black women though. We can't. That only works for white women.
But what does objectification mean? So when if I saw somebody in a bikini and thought, wow, she's got a fantastic figure, she must go to gym a lot.
So I think that's fantastic.
The study was that the same part of your brain lights up is when you see a hammer and a screwdriver or like a tool. You see her as something that you would just want to have sex with. You don't see her as a person.
Do you have sex
Or
with
that you want to
hammer?
build a sugar with her because she looks like she'd be really good at it. All right, so unfortunately we are now out of time. So we are going to have to kind of end on that note, but I think it's a great question kind of to think of, since I think the objectification and the issue of what makes a man, what makes a woman, plays a lot into when we're having these conversations of sex work and just the LGBTQ community as a whole. This is something that keeps popping up for both of us. So I would like to give our panel a really big round of applause. This has been
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I feel like we did fantastic. There's a sign-up sheet if you'd like to be informed of future panels or Queerbell events. Emerson just handed it to me, another modification of our relationship, so it's right here. So please feel free to sign up. And thank you guys again for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for allowing me to participate.